Hey everybody, Ross Hill here, Director of Intelligence for At Risk's Global Risk Intelligence team, and welcome to the latest edition of our Global Risk Intelligence Insights, where we just run over a couple of things that are important or interesting for the week ahead. So the first one, keeping up with the conflict in Ukraine. So we have seen a slight escalation in the conflict over the last few days or so, particularly in terms of missile strikes, shelling and air attacks, Russia targeting some of Ukraine's western cities for the first time. Ballistic missiles killed 35 at the Yavoriv military training center, which is only about 10 miles from the Polish border. That's likely an attempt to interfere with Western aid deliveries to Ukraine. Russia, a couple of days before, announced that it will treat international aid shipments as military targets. In terms of ground operations, remaining fairly limited at the moment. Russia really trying to regroup, improve its transport and logistics. Some reporting saying also bringing in reinforcements, including mercenaries from Libya, Syria and Central Asia. That's somewhat suggestive of how the conflict appears to be going for Russia. We've also seen several high-ranking military officers killed in the conflict. Normally they stay away from where the actual fighting is, and it suggests that those officers moving into those areas where they are actually at risk, it means that the conflict is not going as planned for Russia. Ukraine also claiming that it's shooting down Russian aircraft, and that's indicative of Russia still not controlling Ukrainian airspace. Despite that, Russia's made some gains and is continuing to slowly move towards Kiev, where it will probably kind of encircle the city at the beginning. Don't see a major ground operation in Kiev happening imminently. Around all of that, we do have negotiations ongoing, a fourth round of talks taking place between Russia and Ukraine today. Yesterday, both Russian and Ukrainian ministers suggested that the talks were moving in the right direction, and maybe they had some documents prepared for possible signing by both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, but the content of those was still unclear, so we don't really know what the agreements might look like. We've also seen some reports that Russia has asked China for military help and help in evading sanctions. China denied that. Russia is now denying that it made those requests too, but the US warned of repercussions to China if it did assist. We actually have some negotiations between Jake Sullivan, who's America's national security advisor, and Yang Jiechi, a senior Chinese official in Rome today. They're going to be talking about generally US and China kind of competition, but we'll also see lots of talks around Ukraine and Russia. So it'll be interesting to kind of monitor any announcements that come out over those talks. In terms of an outlook, the way it's looking at the moment, it appears like it's going to be a prolonged conflict unless we do get some kind of negotiated end to it. And then underneath all that, we have to consider the ongoing risk that under increasing pressure, Putin might escalate the situation further. We've seen lots of reporting over the last few days or so about the potential use of chemical weapons, and then other options, dragging NATO into the conflict, with those strikes close to the Polish border. Might be seeing some kind of signs of Russia looking to hamper the supply of weapons and other aid to Ukraine, and that could potentially spill over into Poland itself. But one of the really interesting things that we're seeing based on the conflict in Ukraine is the highlighting of companies that are operating in Russia or look like they're operating in support of the Russian regime. We've seen a couple of lists be published online, one by Yale University and then one called Putin 100. The first one by Yale is keeping a list of companies that have withdrawn and haven't withdrawn from Russia. The second one, the Putin 100 list, that's looking at companies that are providing funding for Russian fossil fuel infrastructure and projects in particular. That's an interesting one because it lists things like particular executives from companies like the Italian bank Unicredit, the CEO of Lloyd's of London, but just, in listing a significant number of companies that are involved in financing projects in Russia. And these lists are getting a bit of traction publicly, and they're increasing public pressure for companies to withdraw from Russia. The last week or so, we've seen McDonald's and Coca-Cola both announce that they're suspending their operations in Russia. And that's really come about because quite a lot of public pressure that we've seen about them carrying on operating there, when a lot of companies were fairly quick to withdraw at the beginning. But really, this is actually part of a wider trend that we've actually seen on the increasing scrutiny of company and executive behaviours. And it's interesting because the number of companies that we've seen withdraw from Russia sets a pretty kind of significant precedent of what is expected for companies' behaviour during situations like this. I think when you look at other issues where we see pressure on companies such as climate and human rights, those same companies accused of supporting the Russian economy, they're also likely invested in places like China, Saudi Arabia, or investing more widely in fossil fuel projects. So I think we'll start to see increasing pressure on companies to take their own action in withdrawing support in some of those economies or for some of those industries. If they don't, it does kind of increase the risk to executives. We see potentially increased risk from insider threat and employee activism. I think over the last couple of years where we've seen Google employees refuse to work on particular projects, and Amazon employees put pressure on the company over its climate change policies. So further things like that when it comes to particular topics, climate is going to be a big one. And then also risks of direct activism. So they are the couple of things that we've been keeping a close eye on over the last week or so. We hope you enjoyed the content. Thank you very much.